the Tri-State Sports Leader, this is WGEM Sports.
We had lots of action all over the Tri-States this afternoon, but we're going to start up in Iowa with some girls soccer action. Fort Madison hosting rivals Keokuk for a rainy day matchup. Bloodhounds in control early on. Hallie Mankey is going to look and find taking Snot downfield. Snot turning on the Jets and using some trickery to sneak this one on in there. That's a goal for Snot, and Fort Madison is on the board early. But Relina Wong was ready to respond. Some help from her defenders before fighting and securing the save on this kick. And there'll be more where that came from. Able to beat Snot to the ball this time. Scoop it up to prevent another Fort Madison goal. It was a total team effort in this one tonight. And after a weather delay, Fort Madison would complete the shutout and take down Keokuk 5-0. Let's switch it up a bit and head to Missouri for some baseball now. First stop of the baseball journey tonight is in Monroe City. They were hosting North Shelby. Raiders' Grady Gander sends this ball a gander into deep right center field. He'd storm around the bases as he drives in not one but the first 2 runs of this ball game to put his team ahead. The hit parade would continue and wouldn't stop there. Another shot into shallow left would bring Gander around the bases and sliding into home base. North was piling it on in the first inning. Isaac Berry with a shot up the middle drives home another Raider run, but Monroe City would answer the bell in the bottom frame. Landon Jones with a dribbler to third base. The throw to first is off the mark, and that would bring in the first Panther run of the day. North Shelby had Monroe City's number though. Raiders defeat the Panthers 22-4. Sticking in Missouri, Drew Watson and Macomb making the trip to take on the Panthers. Pitching duel early. Palmyra's Colby Jones on the bump and gets the Macomb batter to send a breeze his way to retire the side. The Bombers in some trouble, bases loaded, and they would retire the side with a punch out of their own and get out of the jam. The bats would pick up in the fourth. Brian Hortzmeyer with a big rip over the right fielder's head. He would make his way around the bases on the triple for Palmyra. He wouldn't be there long. Logan Kreger up to bat next, poking this one through the infield, and he would plate Hortzmeyer. Palmyra would keep that momentum going, and they would pick up the 4-0 shutout victory over Macomb. Let's check in with other baseball scores from across the area. Canton shuts out Louisiana 15-0. Blue Taylor with a no-hitter in that matchup. Centralia gets by South Shelby 12-0. Illini West defeats Camp Point 15-0. On the softball dirt, Rushville gets by Farmington 9-8 in a close matchup there. Back to the soccer pitch in Illinois, Macomb gets by Canton 2-0. And Hannibal stays hot on the pitch, 8-0 over Fulton. Abby Martin with the hat trick in that one.